The NFL is heating up. And you want to know how we know the NFL is heating up? Because there is so many injuries. And you got to know how these injuries are going to impact this NFL slate. Welcome to NFL Week 5 Injury Report. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus. What is up, folks? I'm your host here, the DGen Doc, and it's another week, which means we've got more injuries. And it seems like they are absolutely flooding in this week, so we've got a ton to get to. First off, I will do a little bit of how this is going to run down on this NFL Week 5 injury report. This is the time where I get a little bit in depth and break down some of the biggest injuries around the NFL. Now, there may be some shows you've seen or some other people that have done something like it, but it's usually focused on the offensive side of the ball. I'm here for my defensive lovers. This is an IDP Plus channel. It's IDP Focus. So we're going to focus on defense in this episode where I'll do more of an in-depth analysis. However, for my offensive fantasy football guys, I will do an offensive rundown at the end, more kind of just hit the wave tops, hit the surface level, what you need to know, less analysis type thing. But I will give you those information, a little offensive rundown, but you got to wait for the end because it is a defensive focused show. Time to give love to the defense. And like I said, we've got a ton of guys to get to. So let's just go ahead and get started here. Let's start off with the guy that we've talked about a couple times already on this show, which is never a good thing. Andrew Van Ginkel, outside linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, who are playing in London after playing in Ireland last week. Yeah, he's already reported at the beginning of the week that he's not expected to practice at all and is going to be out for this week. And they've stayed true to that. He has not practiced in the first 2 weeks. He did not play last week with this neck injury. Neck injuries, as we kind of talk about it, there's a lot going on in the neck, obviously here just showing the spine and cervical vertebrae and such, but there's the muscles, there's nerves, there's, a whole bunch of things running through there. And so neck is what they generally give us. Now, neck, when we talk about football players, is a bit scary because by the violent nature of the game and how, they have to hit and how their contact to the head all the time, their neck has to not only be strong, but it has to be able to withstand, let's say a 300-pound lineman, going helmet to helmet or landing on your neck or something like that. And that just doesn't happen a lot to normal folks. So necks particularly already kind of a tricky injury, but when you talk about NFL, college, like football in general, it's a very tricky thing because we can now be talking about a quality of life situation. We've seen multiple guys have talked about, Chris Carson, talked about Zach Moss, who got cut and may have to retire. Like, these can not only be season-ending type things, but also career-threatening. So the neck is not something you want to mess around with. You want to make sure the player is fully back and ready to go. Now, I talked about, I think last week, I had some concerns here. He already had a concussion early in the year. Now, having with this neck injury, clearly things aren't right there. You do not want to rush this, or it could turn into one of those long-term things. And a guy where some of those concerns were validated was star defensive tackle Nnamdi Madubuike. Been talking about him for weeks. Hey, I don't like the sounds of this. The neck already gives you kind of turns on the spidey senses a bit, but especially, bigger guys, they've already got a lot of weight to carry on the defensive line. It's such a physical, every play you are going, pads are hitting helmet to helmet. That's a lot on the neck, especially for a big boy. And unfortunately, he's been put on the IR and will be out for the rest of the season. Madubuike. That's a massive loss, not only to our fantasy lineups, but to the Baltimore Ravens defense as a whole. We've seen, the Detroit Lions ran all up and down this vaunted Ravens defense because they're missing that core piece in the middle. So Madubuike being out, obviously terrible for the IDP streets, but also just the Ravens defense in general. I can't trust that rush defense if he's going to be out for the season. They got to figure out a way to, he can't be replaced by one person, but to try to bring some guys in to get a rotation and get that middle plugged up there. So neck injuries, always kind of scary in the NFL. We've seen kind of the worst case scenario here in one, hoping Van Ginkel isn't to that extent, but the more time he misses and the more we don't get clear-cut guidance, the more you start to get concerned. All right, moving off the next, and we're going to a guy who there was optimism at the beginning of the week, but at this point, not so much. That is Jets defensive end edge rusher Jermaine Johnson there coming out of FSU. He had an ankle injury he picked up early in the season, has been out the past few weeks, has not practiced, but Aaron Glenn said, hey, there's a good chance he plays this week. Like, we're kind of expecting him back. Well, at this point, I'm recording this Thursday night, obviously, 2 straight no practices. He was working off the side, with the trainer, whatever, but it's hard to really have confidence he's going to be out there. You don't really typically go from not practicing at all to just, hey, we're going to turn it on after being out for several weeks. Sometimes if it's a situation where a guy finishes a game and, he just needs some time to rest and it's something small, sure. But he's already missed a couple weeks. It's hard to expect him at this point to be out there. So you're definitely going to want to have a pivot point for Jermaine Johnson in your lineups. All right. I already talked about one, but I feel like we can spend a lot of time, probably half this show, talking about one team. Unfortunately, Baltimore Ravens fans, cover your earmuffs, but you guys are really beat up on the defensive side of the ball, and you typically have a lot of good players on defense. So we're going to spend some time talking about him. We already talked about Madubuike. He's out for the year. You can obviously drop him. It sucks. He's a great player, but he's done. And it's probably better, when we talk quality of life and what the potential, like, typically, a lot of the medical team's assessment is like, well, what could go wrong? Like, can we make this a lot worse? When you talk about the neck, yeah, you absolutely can. And you start talking about, like, things that we don't even really want to discuss when we talk about, again, quality of life. I'll just kind of leave it at that. Now, let's move on. Cornerback Marlon Humphrey, nickelback here, one of their better players. He got an injury last week against the Chiefs. Expected to miss a few weeks right away. Likely, he probably won't come back until after Baltimore has a bye in week 7. So obviously we're in week 5. That kind of plays into it. How bad are some of these injuries? Do we want to try to rush it before the bye, or do we wait until after the bye and let these guys come back fully healthy? Now, when we talk about a calf strain here, so calf strain just speaks to damage to your muscle in your calf. You got 2 muscles in your calf, your gastroc and your soleus. Typically, people refer to the gastroc. It's the bigger one on top that most people talk about. But it could be a soleus issue here, which just sits underneath that big muscle there, one on each side. And when the initial reports say that it's expected to be out a couple weeks, that kind of tells me it's more in that grade 2 range. We talk about all kind of muscle strains. You have this grading system. It just talks about severity. So mild is, everything is micro tearing of the muscle fibers in the muscle. Grade 1 is, not a ton. Grade 2 is a moderate amount. Grade 3 is a full tear. It's not a full tear. He needs surgery. It's Humpty Dumpty. That's not regenerating back on its own. So we're probably somewhere in this grade 2 range. Typically for a calf strain, that could be anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, because it is a kind of a spectrum, more so than definitely. Grade 1's that 1 to 2 week range, where, hey, it's usually not too bad. But when they already said expecting to miss a few weeks, that typically says, well, it's not the 1 to 2, it's more that 3 to 4 type deal. So likely dealing with a grade 2 calf injury. These are tough because you don't want to come back too soon, because if you come back before you're fully ready, you are at a moderate re-injury risk, and you can take something from weeks to months. So Marlon Humphrey, definitely expect him out this week, and probably for a couple weeks, I would say 2 to 3 weeks at least. A similar situation, different body part, Roquan Smith, the all-pro, all-world linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens, hamstring strain. We saw him leave the game. This was just a brutal game. Not only did you get your asses kicked over an Arrowhead at Kansas City, a team that was 1-3 and struggling, and you were trying to get your season on track, but you just lost a ton of guys to a roster that was already beat up. Roquan Smith left the game, officially called a grade 2 hamstring strain. This was another one reported out. It's kind of nice when they just kind of let the cards hang out there and tell you what it is. Grade 2 hamstring strain, which typically expect out 3 to 4 weeks. This can take anywhere from really 4 to 6 to fully 100% get back. It's a similar situation to the calf. We talk about all your muscle strains, grade 1, 2, or 3. It's grade 2 is that moderate amount of damage. Grade 1, typically that 1 to 2 week range. Grade 2, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks is where you could be at. But you want to expect him out at least 3 weeks there. You don't really want to press something back too soon with the hamstring. I talked about calves being a moderate re-injury risk. Hamstrings move into that moderate to high re-injury risk if you get back too soon. And really the bad part about hamstrings, if you've had one, you've experienced this, is you start to feel better before the hamstring is fully recovered. And you really can't often test the hamstring until you go into that full sprint, that maximal effort, which, if a guy's like, hey, I'm doing well, and he practices but doesn't really get into that full sprint, and he gets into the game, and you got no choice but to go 110%. And that's where the hamstring often tends to fail. And you see, something like a setback that we saw to Christian Gonzalez at the beginning of the year, expecting him back week 1 and had that setback and push that back out several weeks. So Roquan Smith, expect him out at least 3 weeks, if not a little bit longer. This is a tough injury that you don't really want to rush back from. Now, we'll go. You know what? I'll continue with the bad news and I'll finish with the positive news. Bad news recently. Kyle Hamilton played the whole game, did not appear injured. He was, then he showed up limited on the practice report with, is always a concern because if a guy's not really reported to be injured or anything like that, and they're limited, there's always the concern, well, shoot, did he get injured during practice? And that seems to be the case. Obviously, if you get injured on Wednesday or Thursday, you have less time to recover. So it sounds like the injury did recur in practice per reports, and then he did not practice today. So it was bad enough that it held him out of practice today. Never a good sign, especially, now we're 3 days away from game time, and he's not out there with an injury that just happened. Typically, even in best cases, you kind of need a week for a mild groin strain. Now, a groin is an umbrella term. It kind of relates to muscles in the lower abdomen or the inner thigh. Your abductor muscle, your inner thigh muscles is typically what people are talking about, but technically the groin is on the muscles that attach to that pelvic bone there. So that's what he's dealing with here. Again, do not like when guy shows up limited, you didn't know they were injured, it happened in practice, and then it was bad enough that held him out. We haven't got word on severity. He hasn't been ruled out yet, so there's a chance he could return and practice tomorrow, but this is definitely one to watch. Typically, these situations, a guy does not play. However, not all injuries are created equal. That's why I do the show. But at this point, he's definitely someone you need to watch. This is not typically, he's a set and forget guy. If Hamilton's out there, he's playing, I'm going to trust him. But if he doesn't have a full practice tomorrow and is kind of walking in limited, I'd be wary to putting him in your lineups. It's definitely a bit of a re-injury risk concern. All right, finishing up with the Ravens on some positive news, because I know their fans and some of the owners, fantasy owners that have these players need some. Kyle Van Noy, a guy who was dealing with a hamstring strain, didn't get put on IR, which tells me it wasn't too bad. Missed a couple games, but he limited practice yesterday and a full practice today. Beautiful. It's exactly what we want to see. Just want to make sure he has a full practice again tomorrow, which would be the expectation. However, first 2 weeks coming back from an injury is the highest percentage of a re-injury rate, the highest likelihood that a hamstring is going to fail and re-injure. So we're not quite out of the woods yet, but if we're on the right track, if he practices fully again tomorrow, 100%, we're good to go. You can roll Kyle Van Noy out in your lineups in a matchup against the Texans offensive line that sucks. They're really bad. They're one of the worst. That's why the Texans have been bad this season. So if you do have, a healthy Kyle Van Noy out there to at least apply some pressure to CJ Stroud, that's a matchup you can take advantage of. Let's get over to the Lions, who are also fairly beat up this week. Cornerback DJ Reed suffered a hamstring injury that required him to get carted off. Typically not a great sign. That was kind of, shown to be the case. He was already been put on IR. He's going to be out. It sounds like, it could be 6 to 8 weeks here. This is a pretty significant hamstring strain, they're calling it. Obviously, him on IR tells us he's going to be out at least 4 weeks. Now, I don't think this is going to get to the grade 3 range where it's a full tear because you would need surgery in that case, a la something like we saw with Dak Prescott last year. Typically, that pretty soon. Doesn't sound like that's the case. Sounds like he will be back at some point this season. It's just not going to be for several weeks. Again, prepare for at least him to be out for 6 weeks. Now, other cornerback, Terrion Arnold, also went down with a shoulder injury. Good news is not nearly as serious. Limited practice yesterday, full practice today. Sounds like he's going to be good to go. Also might be getting some reinforcements back on the interior defensive line. Defensive tackle Alim McNeill, one of many guys that went down on the defense with a serious injury last year. I believe it was an ACL tear. Coming off that ACL tear last year, he got his practice window opened up to limited practices, so not a lock he's going to return this week, but it sounds like he is very close to a return. So if not this week, next week. Guy that I love the way he plays. I would not really roll him out there the first game coming off an ACL tear. I probably wait at least 2 to 3 games to see how he's looking before I go ahead and trust him with one of my starting spots there. But he's getting back, expect him to kind of ramp up there. Defensive linemen usually perform a little bit better than running backs, wide receivers, cornerbacks, guys that have to cut a little bit less when they're coming off these significant knee injuries. So this is a guy that hopefully in a couple weeks you can start rolling out there and he can start getting a push on that interior line, because Aiden Hutchinson is, he's coming off the edge. So these quarterbacks are having to step up. So, and Muhammad is coming off the other edge. He stepped up very well for them on the edge. So there's going to be room for, those big guys in the middle to walk into some easy sacks. So Alim McNeill is a guy who's definitely capable of that. It's going to take him a couple weeks to get back. So don't be rushing on that. Jags defensive end, Travon Walker, wrist injury, got banged up last week in that big win against San Francisco. And knocked out of the game. He actually had surgery already on his wrist. Now, hand and wrists they're annoying injuries, but these surgeries aren't nearly as long. Like typically you hear a guy has surgery, he's going to be out for the season or a long time. That's not the case with these wrist and hands. We don't know exactly what was done, but he was called day-to-day. Liam Cohen, head coach, already said that he has a chance to play on Monday night. I think that's a bit aggressive, a bit unrealistic. He didn't practice today. Again, they play on Monday, so this is really like their Wednesday injury report. But I'd be hard-pressed to think he's going to play in this game Monday night against the Chiefs. But it does, the good news, not a long-term injury. So you expect him out maybe 1 to 2 weeks, but it sounds like Walker's going to be back. And typically with those minor surgeries, they're kind of like, all right, once you're healed, once you're kind of gone through that surgery protocol and done what you need to do, let it kind of heal up, you're good to go. So Travon Walker hopefully only going to miss maybe 1 or if not 2 games, but should be back in our lineups very soon. We're going to talk about a couple of Bucks together, a couple of cornerbacks, Jamel Dean and the guy who comes in to replace him, Benjamin Morrison, the Notre Dame rookie, who's looking really good. They actually both were playing pretty damn well. Jamel Dean banged up with a groin, hip injury, and then Benjamin Morrison with a hamstring. None of them sound like super serious, but they both left the game and have not practiced to this point in the week. So that cornerback room for the Bucks, it's going to get pretty damn thin. You're probably going to have a brand new starter on either the outside corner, or they're either going to move Parrish, the rookie, out from nickel to the outside. You're playing the Seahawks. You got Cooper Kupp, you got JSN there. They typically have a lot of targets. Torrey Horton now as well out of the slot position. They have not been able to run the ball as effectively as Seahawks would like, right? So you're getting a lot of passing opportunities. You would expect Baker and that offense to put up some points. So it's a situation where the DBs for the Bucks can run themselves into some decent tackle opportunities. You always have Sam Darnold on the other side, so some pass breakups, interceptions. But we are likely gonna get a new starter there for the Bucks. So maybe the rookie Parrish is a guy that moves out to outside corner, so he's playing all the time now and not just in nickel packages. But expect Dean and Morrison to be out for that Bucks secondary. Now to another rookie quarterback, Will Johnson, dealing with a groin injury. Talked about him. He's missed the last 2 weeks, but he's back at practice. 2 limited practices. Now, I've seen some videos. He's moving around pretty damn well. It sounds like he was doing all the individual drills with the DBs, which the groin, with those adductor, muscles, those inner hip muscles, and the lower abdominals, twisting, rotating, a lot of those things typically aggravate it. From the videos I saw, he was looking pretty damn good. Now, it wasn't exactly going 100%, but he was not just going through the motions there. So despite just 2 limited practices, this is one to watch. I think he's got a shot to be able to play. And, I think Will Johnson has the chance to be the steal of the draft. I think he's dropped way too far. The first 2 games he played, he's still leading the team with 4 pass deflections. Like, this guy, I think, is going to be a stud. So if they can get him back, they lost Garrett Williams to the IR. Max Milton was able to come back, but they kind of lost 3 cornerbacks in one game. If they can get Will Johnson back this week, I think this Arizona secondary is a formidable force. So look for him to see if he can fully practice tomorrow and get back out there. Another guy in kind of very similar core, different injury, but Matt Milano, linebacker for the Buffalo Bills, dealing with a pec injury, not a full tear. I was kind of going through what a pec injury is, damage to your pec muscle. You'll get some of that bruising similar to a hamstring there. He didn't have it that much because that's typically a full tear that things, need surgery. But missed the past 2 weeks, but he's back at practices and has a good shot to play this week. Only limited, though. It's kind of the similar thing with Will Johnson. I want to see a full practice to have confidence in them that they're going to go out there and start this weekend and kind of produce. So we'll see. Typically, that's a common approach for these NFL teams. Hey, Let's get you practicing on Wednesday. See how it looks. Make sure you feel good. Okay, Thursday, same thing. Let's see how the body takes it 2 days in a row. Then you're feeling good. Boom. Let's fully practice on Friday and see if we can play this game on Sunday. So, both Milano and Johnson ones you want to watch there. Myles Garrett, defensive end, ankle injury. We're not gonna spend a lot of time here because finished the game against the Lions. No practice on Wednesday, but already a limited practice today. All signs point to him being able to play. It's just one of those things. Hey, more sore, more hurt than injured type of a deal. He's going to play through it. He's going to be fine. And he's got a great matchup. I mean, if Myles Garrett's out there, you're playing him. It's not even a conversation. But let's talk about the Vikings offensive line for a second. They have 4 guys that were in line to start that are not practicing 2 straight times in a row. You got the center, Ryan Kelly, who's got multiple concussions in the past couple weeks. He's not playing. You've got the rookie left guard, Donovan Jackson, with the wrist surgery. He's going to be out. He's not ready to come back. And then you got right tackle Brian O'Neill, one of the better tackles in football. He's got an MCL sprain. He's going to be out this week, if not the week after as well. And then one of their backups who was supposed to fill in guard is also not practicing with a hamstring. Not only Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, anyone on the Browns defensive line can have themselves a day. And let's not forget, we do have Carson Wentz as quarterbacks who has a tendency to hold on the ball a little bit, take some sacks, some fumbles, some turnovers and things like that. Browns, I really like their defense in this one. I think they have a really good matchup, and that offensive line for the Vikings is super beat up. Chase Young has not played yet this season. He was already ruled out. He's got a calf injury. Whether there's been a setback is probably what happened. Was talking about, hey, earlier, you don't want to rush back too soon from these calves, hamstrings. You can go ahead and re-injure and take something from weeks and turn it into months. Sounds like what we got with Chase Young. He's already been ruled out early in the week, despite some optimistic reports last week. Clearly, he's not practicing. He's not going to play. Not a great sign for Chase Young. A couple guys that we'll finish out here, a little bit more minor stuff that we wanted to talk about because they were a big enough name. Zaire Franklin, all-world linebacker for the Indianapolis Colts. Ankle injury, kind of out of nowhere popped up. One of those things where didn't practice yesterday, but was a full practice today. So again, one of those things where more hurt than actually injured. He should be good to go. Milton Williams, though, kind of falls into the category of Kyle Hamilton, where he was a limited practice yesterday, but he did not practice today with an ankle injury. Now, did he come off the game and say, my ankle's a little bit sore, let me take it easy? And then, wow, it's really sore. I'm not going to practice today in hopes of practicing tomorrow. Did he practice yesterday and then get injured? And then it's away that way. So Kyle Hamilton reports are saying it happened in practice. Milton Williams, I wasn't able to find anything confirming that, but you always got to ask that question. Was this something that happened in practice? Did he turn an ankle in practice? And is he going to be ready to play in just a couple days later? So tomorrow is a huge day for Milton Williams and anyone who has him on their team. He's been a stud this year. The Bills have been able to run the ball very effectively behind a good offensive line. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for tackles, TFLs for him against James Cook and, in Josh Allen and that offense. So this is one to watch. You definitely want to pay attention if he's going to be out there. Again, you'd love a full practice to have some confidence, but, even you'll take a limited practice at this point. Any kind of positive signs that he can play Sunday. And then the final one's Daron Payne, who also got added to the injury report today with a knee injury. Got to question if that happened. He was good yesterday. Did it happen during practice? Did something just flare up? What are we talking about here? The good news is he did travel to the team all the way out to Los Angeles, where, I'll talk about some offensive guys that did not make the trip and clearly already ruled out. So at least he's got a shot to play. Kind of need more information on this one. Haven't got a lot that's been reported, but another one keep your eyes out for. So that is the defensive in-depth rundown. Now I'm going to do a very quick offensive rundown for my offensive people. If you're playing IDP, you're probably playing, what we call normal or offensive fantasy football. But here it is. So we're going to do it quick and dirty. Continuing with the Ravens trend. Quarterback Lamar Jackson, doubtful this week. Already missed 2 practices. They reported it could be a 2 to 3 week injury. Again, do you really want to risk a hobbled Lamar Jackson making his injury worse? Or do you just roll out Cooper Rush when you don't have half your team playing anyway? So I am not expecting Lamar Jackson to play. If he does practice tomorrow and does play, this is a high re-injury risk. I would, he's going to be hobbled, not himself, against a very good Texans defense. As crazy as it sounds, I would not be playing Lamar Jackson this week. Cedric Tillman, wide receiver for the Browns, put on IR with a hamstring injury. Look for guys, obviously Jerry Jeudy, but guys like Isaiah Bond to sneak up. You got Dylan Gabriel, the rookie, starting. So who's he going to find? Is it going to be Njoku? Is it going to be Harold Fannin? They're going to have to find some other targets in that offense. Personally, I think it's going to be a lot of Quinshon Judkins. I think he's in for a massive day against both these offenses kind of suck, the Vikings and the Browns. I think it's going to be ugly defensive, run-the-ball game. So that's the guy I'm targeting that one. Tyreek Hill, Malik Nabers, let's just do them both. As much as it pains me as a Giants fan, Malik Nabers, ACL, lateral meniscus tear, he's out for the season. The good news is not any other ligaments involved. Don't love that the meniscus was involved, but there is a chance, probably a reasonable chance that you can't expect him out there week 1. He's not going to be 100%, but there is a chance he could be active. Tyreek Hill, on the other hand, this was a knee dislocation with multiple ligaments torn. Typically, when someone says my knee dislocates, they're talking about their patella, their kneecap. Rarely does the actual knee joint dislocate, but if anyone saw the picture, saw the video, that's what happened. Your leg is not supposed to be pointing this way. Multiple ligaments are torn. Any multi-ligament knee injury kind of pushes you out further to that 12-month recovery as opposed to that 10-month recovery for just an ACL tear. So, especially given the age of Tyreek Hill, it's hard to really be optimistic, even career-wise, not just next season. Running back for the Jets, Braelon Allen, placed in the IR with an MCL sprain. Expect him out closer to 6 to 8 weeks. You've got, Brock Purdy, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. If you're watching this, I don't know if I'm going to flip this around before the game starts. So hopefully you already know all those guys are ruled out. Did just get news, right before I went live here, I started recording. Brock Purdy suffered a setback with that toe injury, so it sounds like it could be a multi-week absence, and we get to watch more Mac Jones. Yay for us. Sorry if you're a 49ers fan. A couple more to round these out. We'll go Commanders here. Jayden Daniels, back, medically cleared, fully practicing. He's going to be good to go. You can roll him out in your lineups. But no Terry McLaurin, and Deebo Samuel not practicing, but did travel with the team. So it sounds like he might try to give it a go, dealing with the heel injury. McLaurin's definitely been ruled out. So is Noah Brown. But Jayden Daniels might have to find some different targets, Ertz a lot, or some other guys, Luke McCaffrey, to step up there. Chuba Hubbard played with a calf injury last week, didn't practice Wednesday, kind of went through, was able to play. He was, the game got out of hand, but 4.9 yards a carry. He was doing pretty well. Sounds like he was worse after the game, though. 2 straight DNPs. I'm not practicing. Good chance he's not going to play. Rico Dowdle now steps up into a nice opportunity against the 3rd worst rushing defense in the league in the Miami Dolphins. So if you got Rico Dowdle or he's on the waivers, it might be worth the pickup because Chuba might not play, and he's an RB1 against that Miami Dolphins. I will take that all day. And then finally, one to watch out for, Michael Pittman, added to the injury report today with a hamstring injury. Always concerned for, did this happen during practice? Now, was this more of, hey, I just felt to tighten up a little bit. I just want to be cautious. I don't want to, ruin anything, and he'll be back out there. Or did he actually injure this? And now we have a situation where he's not going to be playing it out for a couple weeks. One to watch. We don't have all that information just yet. Tomorrow's practice will be a huge indication there. All right, folks. Hey, I appreciate you guys. You guys have been, there's a new series just this year, so still open to recommendations, but I really appreciate the support you've been given. The views have been going up, the likes, I'm taking that as a good sign. So hopefully y'all are liking what you're seeing. But if you got any questions about anyone, the best way to reach out is over on X at the DJN Doc. I put out usually a daily injury report, just kind of update things like that. This is obviously the most in-depth I'll get on this long form type video. But yeah, if you got anything, you can drop them in the comments there. I will try to do my best to get to these comments. But hey, if you got anyone in particular, just either drop a comment or reach out to me over on X. But NFL is here. NFL is in full force, and we know that because we've got a litany of injuries. But excited to break it all down with you guys every single week. And we talk football 24/7 all the time here at IDP Plus. So from the DJN Doc here at IDP Plus, I am...
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.